Hey everybody, Alex of BP Autosports again for episode 5 of Building 2JP's Turbo System. In the previous episodes, we took raw materials and turned them into a functional exhaust manifold. And the premise of today's video is to finish the other hot side components in the form of the exhaust and the wastegate dump tubes. I have the materials for the exhaust and the dump tubes laid out on the ground over here, so why don't we go take a look at those. Alright, we have 3 UJ bends and a 4-inch flex bellow. Now I have the wastegate outlet flanges and the turbine outlet flange in their respective homes. And I think that I'm going to start this by working on the exhaust. So let's take our 4-inch UJ bend, start cutting, and see where we go from there. Alright, as you can see, I have the turbine outlet flange tacked to the first bend that'll be part of the exhaust. So after this bend, I'm going to put this flex bellows in. That way, if the chassis flexes at all, it will compensate for that and prevent the tube from breaking, as I am going to tie this tube into the chassis. In addition to that, it also provides a space for, or a place rather, for the tube to expand and contract as it heats and cools. So these are directional. You can see this is the inlet side, nice smooth little bump right there. This is the outlet side. It has that sharp dividing line right there. So all you do is go on, sleeve it, you catch your gloves in between the tube and the bellow, but sleeves on right like that, and put a couple of tacks and you're ready to go. So I'm going to tack this, then take it back over to the rig, test fit it, and if all is well there, and I like the way that it fits on there, I'll go ahead and weld these components together and keep working forward from there. Check that out. Already off to a good start. So from here, I'm trying to go through this gap in the chassis right here. And this 45-degree bend seems as though it will be the logical next step. So it won't be a full 45. You can see that it does not fit into the bellows there. But holding it up, looking at it, it appears as though if I cut this in half, take it down to a 22.5-degree angle approximately, that will be our ticket to having this exhaust run the way that we want it. So let me make that cut, fit it up, and we'll go from there. That 22.5 or thereabouts worked out pretty much perfectly. So obviously we're shooting the gap between the shock and the chassis there. And what we're going to do for the tip will be pretty cool. I have this leftover a little bit more than 90 degree, 100, 120 degree, something like that bend that will go on the end like so. And I'm actually going to do a neat miter cut on the bend here, which you guys will see later on, that will give it a little bit more character than if I were to just dump the 4-inch tube out there or do something else. So now that we know this 22-degree portion fits, I'll go ahead, get that prepped, get it tacked, and then I can start working on the tip. we go. I have a nice different style tip on the exhaust there. I wanted to do something rather than just dump a 4-inch tube out into the ethers. So I ended up making this nice miter cut tip out of a bend. Looks really cool. Sits along the side of it, parallel to this tube, but sticking out a bit to shoot any flames or whatever else out that way. So looks real cool. And I have here a little tab that will be the beginning of the exhaust mount, which I think it will sit somewhere like that. And then I'll make a mild steel one that will come up the side of the chassis. Both will have gussets on them and all that. So let me go ahead and get this mount done up, and I'll check back in a little bit. Well, there's the exhaust. Came out very nice. Have the mount right there. And the bolt isn't tight, but there will be no play there. So, have the exhaust done, but it's about the end of the day here. So I think I'm going to wait until tomorrow to do the wastegate dump tubes. So, catch you guys then. Hey everybody, it's the day after we built the exhaust for 2JP, so now it's time to do the wastegate dump tubes. So what we're working with here, you can see the placement of the two wastegates there, and we're going to try to shoot them down into this gap in the chassis right there. So I have my two UJ bends, and I have everything else in place where it needs to be, so why don't we go ahead and start figuring these out. I think I am going to start with the innermost wastegate, as that will be the most difficult one to contend with as far as space and packaging goes. So, looking at it here, there's still plenty of room to that outermost primary. That one right there. So, I guess I will cut the 45-degree bend, which is obviously that one there, off one of these UJs. See where that gets me, and then we can go from there. Alright, I have my 45-degree bend all cut, prepped. The way it needs to be to fit in here. I did have to tighten up the centerline radius on the bend here, which what I mean by that is I ground the inside of it to tip the tube more that way. And in doing that, I'm not sure if I'll be able to get a shot here. There we go. A gap to the manifold primary there, and it puts me in a good position down here to run the rest of the tube. So I will take this, I'll pull the wastegate outlet flange off of that inner wastegate, get that tacked, or I guess I can get it welded together, and then we can move forward from there. So yeah, I'll go ahead, I'll pull that flange off, get her welded up, and then we'll keep building. Alright, we have our aggressive 45-degree bend back on that innermost wastegate, and looking at this and holding this 45-degree section of the second UJ up, I think that 45 is going to get us the angle that we need to shoot down through that gap in the chassis. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this 45-degree bend off of this UJ get it fit up in there, get it prepped, and check back in a few minutes. All right, have our second 45 cut and ready to be fit up here. So if I hold it up to 45 on the flange, we have perfect clearance and the perfect angle for this dump tube. So I can go ahead now and deburr, prep this side, prep the surface of it, mark it, get it welded to the other portion of this dump tube up on the flange there. Then I can mark out the bottom for our miter cut. So go ahead, get it prepped, and I'll see you guys over at the welding bench. There we have the first dump tube. Welds came out nice, clean and simple. You can see some of the penetration on the inside of the flange there. Be a little bit more difficult to see the weld down in the tube. You can kind of get a glimpse of it there. So the next order of business is to put it back on the rig, and then we will mark out on this long straight section the miter cut that will be put on it, so it isn't just a straight tube dumping into Neverland underneath of the rig here. So let me throw this tube back on the wastegate, and I will meet you guys underneath of the rig and show you how I mark these out. Okay, so you can see the tube protrudes underneath of the chassis here, and while we are aiming to dump these exhaust gases out underneath of this razor, we need something that's a little bit more sightly than just a random tube hanging out from underneath of it. So what I like to do is to make a nice miter cut on these, and the best way to mark out this cut is to find a nice flat section on the bottom, which we conveniently have with this portion of the chassis right here. I will take my permanent marker, lay it up against it, and simply trace along. And you can kind of stretch the marker out to get yourself your rough cut line. So, see right there, I have my permanent marker mark, and obviously it's only on one side currently, but the nice thing is the thickness of the marker will space this line downward, whatever its thickness is, which this looks like, oh, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 3/8, something along those lines. So now I will pull this tube out, finish marking this line, make that miter cut, then I can clean the tip of this up, reinstall it, and the first dump tube is complete. There we go. Much nicer than just a random tube dumping underneath of the razor. So now that this one is miter cut and welded and built, and I guess I'm going backwards through the order of operations there, but I digress. This one is complete. We can move on to the other dump tube now. So this one will be a little bit more complex, as I'm going to bring it behind, or I guess in front of this first one, and it'll have to kind of loop down, around, back, so on and so forth, kind of a corkscrewing snake type deal, but nothing that can't be accomplished. So let's go ahead and start mocking some tubes up. And after all that, here is what we have. Corkscrews around the other dump tube. Looking sweet. Look at it. Ooh, down underneath. In line pretty well with the other one. That looks awesome. I'm very happy with that. So that wraps up all of the stainless work. So the next order of business is to take two number 12 bungs, put them in this valve cover, and over here, the other valve cover. This valve cover I also have to put this vibrant oil cap on. So I'll get to knocking those out and check back in a little bit. Now that those valve covers are complete, that marks the end of the fabrication on this project. So why don't we take a look at the finished product? Man, that ended up being something to see. You can see the exhaust, the nice little oblong, weird shaped tip. Looks awesome. Valve covers are both done. Manifold tucks in there nicely. Turbo sits nice. Wastegate dump tubes are nice. Man, this whole project and this whole setup is coming up just so great. Now, the guys are coming tomorrow to pick this thing up. So tomorrow morning, I'll bust the whole setup apart. I still have to put a logo on the exhaust manifold, and I still have to sand the head flange flat and weld the inside of it. So I'm not going to film those portions of it, but I will film their reactions when they come to grab this thing, and man, I can't wait to see what they have to say about it. So until then, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and we'll see you next time.